Hello, this is the Fight Back podcast, hosted by exercise scientist Georgia Very. Here you'll find a series of honest conversations about martial arts and mental health. My guests and I explore the statement that every martial artist has heard: martial arts saved me. How and why do combat sports save people? Listen to find out. This episode is sponsored by Safety, a violence prevention app that could save your life. Now, I want to be very clear that no app is a silver bullet, and in a violent situation, you might freeze, your nervous system might take over, or you might really love your attacker and not feel like you could push a panic button. There are many types of responses that you might have when experiencing violence. However, you want to have the option to be able to panic if you need to. And what do I mean by that? So the Safety app has a panic button that you can press, and it will immediately start taking photos off your selfie camera and your back camera, collect your GPS and audio, and send that data to 3 emergency contacts. To download the Safety app onto your phone is completely free if you are just using the panic button, and you can try out some of their other features for 28 days as well. It's on Apple and Android, and the links to do so are in the show notes for this podcast episode. Once again, I want to say a big thank you to our friends at Safety. Minna, welcome to the Fight Back podcast. Everyone, I'm here today with Minna Kim, who has an incredible and brave story to share with all of you. So she is now a Muay Thai, jiu-jitsu and MMA practitioner. She's been through an incredible ordeal to the point where martial arts have saved her life essentially twice. So we're going to share that story with you. She's also got a background in having her degree in youth counselling, in counselling and youth protection. So she's got some really interesting and valuable perspectives to lend into this space. Minna, welcome to the Fight Back podcast.
Hi, Georgia. Hi, everyone. Hello from Vancouver, Canada. Pleased to be on the show.
So grateful that you, like I said, are being so brave in sharing this story, because it really is incredible, everything that you've been through to become the incredibly strong woman that you are today. So like I mentioned, it really seems like martial arts saved you twice, and we need to tell quite a bit of backstory to even get to the first instance. So tell us a bit about your childhood. You started in Taekwondo. Why was that?
Yes. Well, my father, he's Korean, and, it was very important that family tradition was carried on. And so I was the 3rd generation in my family to get a black belt. And my son, he's now 21. When he was 14, he got his black belt also, but not in Taekwondo, but through my coach's MMA belt system. And so that's 4 generations of black belts in my family. But yeah, my father was a big believer in martial arts and carrying on tradition. I had a pretty bad childhood. People think that, I guess people have a preconceived conception with Asian families being very, what can we say, sort of free of abuse and sort of just pretty much just typical with, having to stay in school and do your best, that type of thing. But behind closed doors, I was getting beaten up every day by my father. So I would probably have to say I didn't really have too much of a childhood, but the only thing that really kept me going probably was the martial arts, because during the time that I was taking my classes at the gym, pretty much that was the only time that I felt free and able to let out some of my pent up aggressions from, I guess, in a sense, being beat up all the time. And as a result, as a child, I did lots of tournaments and competed and got a lot of medals and trophies, which probably, I think if I had lost, I would have probably gotten beaten worse. So, yeah.
Wow. And that childhood really for you set the setting for you meeting your ex and entering into the relationship, which we're going to talk about today. And I will say that what we've already spoken about might be difficult for people to listen to, but what we're going to speak about now also might be incredibly triggering. And so please be kind to yourself, have supports available if you do want to listen, and remember that you can pause or stop this recording at any point if it does make you feel uncomfortable. But yeah, Minna, you met your ex. Tell us about him.
I was quite young. I was 22 when I first met him, and he was 10 years older than me. So, I mean, at that point in time, I was from a very sheltered, but yet very abusive home.
Mm-hmm.
And so this man promised me, who was 10 years older, a good life, and I'll take care of you, and nobody will do that to you ever again. But in turn, that person did exactly what my father did to me, if not worse. And, we talk about victims who pretty much look for someone to save them. And looking back on this now, I can see why I just took off with this man, because he promised me an out,
Mm-hmm.
and I blindly went with him. And I was with him for 4 years, and it ended up being, it actually felt like 40 years, to be honest. But, looking back on this, I can see sort of how I was almost groomed. And I talked about a lot of my childhood. And so he knew a lot of detail about me. And so I think that knowing that much detail about my childhood
Mm-hmm.
framed his method for control and power, and all of the different psychological, mental, emotional, and after that, financial abuse as well. So, yeah, looking back now, and we all kind of talk about would have, should have, I should have done this, I should have done that. But at the time when I was going through it and being so young, I think I did not know uh,
What
what
the
I
red
was going to
flags
do. And
were.
yeah, I don't think I was able at that time to see that and to recognize them for what they were.
What were some of the red flags?
A lot of it had to do with uh, kind of, if I didn't do things exactly the way that he wanted,
Mm-hmm.
such as if there was dog fur on the floor, or if there was a speck of soap on one of the dishes, uh, things that did not meet his standards, well,
Mm-hmm.
then I heard about it. And sorry, I have allergies, so my eyes are a little itchy right now.
All
Uh,
good.
yeah, if I didn't do something exactly to his liking, well, then that was it. I had to meet his wrath and his fury. And other red flags, a lot of the mind control. He would always blame things on me. Look what you're making me do. And he would rationalize his abuse. And sometimes he would hit himself in the face and say, look what you're making me do.
My
And,
God.
you know, a lot of the things had to do with do as I say or else. And I became very, I guess, dependent on this person in financially as well. But not only that, I just couldn't make decisions, even to the point of eating. I remember exactly the day that he started his psychological mind control, telling me that I was fat. And to my recollection at that time, I probably weighed about 125 pounds. And I mean, we know that that's not very big. I mean, I'm 5'5", so one would argue that that's pretty
That's
normal weight,
healthy.
and
Mm.
right, it's quite on the healthy side. And in the 4 years time, by the time I left, I was 107 pounds. My skin had turned green and my hair was falling out.
For any Australian listeners, 107 pounds is about 48 kilos, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
It's
But
very, very, very small.
I could see my ribs, and just there was no meat on my body. It just seemed to just uh even the color of the skin was just really almost green, like sallow. And uh yeah, and it was just no appetite whatsoever, because I'd become accustomed to not eating. And I remember when I did reach 107 pounds and I looked at myself in the mirror. I had just gotten out of the bath and I caught a glimpse of myself, and I thought, oh my goodness, why do you look like that? And it was the first time that I actually accurately took a look at myself, where, some of the World Vision commercials where you see kids that are starving, that are
Yeah.
malnourished, and just, oh my goodness, I did not know that I was in that state until I just looked at myself, and I realized that this was not good. And I think it was at that point that I started thinking, you know, uh, I think I think there's a problem here. But at that time, I think because I was so dependent on this man, and financially I had no money. And so I thought to myself, like, how am I going to get out? And, I think at that point, I think I clearly remember telling myself that something is wrong here.
Mm-hmm. What about his reaction to you losing the weight since he told you you needed to lose weight?
Hmm. When I got to 107 pounds, I remember he looked at me and said, "Oh, you're too skinny now. You better start putting on a bit of weight. You have no boobs and no ass. And so you better start putting on the weight." And so I thought to myself, like, oh my goodness, now I'm going crazy. Now he's telling me I'm too skinny. So what, now I have to change myself for him? But then I realized, I do look quite skinny, so maybe I had better start eating. But then at that point, because I'd become accustomed to not eating and my stomach had shrunk so much,
Mm.
even I remember eating 6 potato chips and feeling like I was going to explode, like I was just so full. Uh, yeah, it's a lot of psychological control. And not only that, internally, what does that do to your body internally when you haven't had the proper nutrients in your body, and 6 potato chips makes you full you know
Absolutely. And I mean, like we can talk about he even tried to kill you.
yes. The first time, he had put yellow sunlight dish detergent, the liquid detergent, in my food. And I remember lifting up the takeout food container and smelling the whiff of that lemon scent,
Mm.
even as of today. And I left this individual on January the 20th, 2001. I still cannot use sunlight dish detergent. I can't even look at it in the supermarket,
Mm.
let alone, I probably would gag if I smelt it. So
Mm-hmm.
that was the first time. And the second time, he's I knew he was on something because I had just managed the restaurant and came home, and he somehow wanted that day off, but I think it was because he had planned this out to, kill me that night. And I remember going into the house and wondering where my son and where my husband was. And so I found them in the basement, and I said, "Oh, what are you doing in there?" And he said, "Oh, come into the basement. I just want to show you something." And so I came in, and as soon as I came in, he locked the door behind me. And I looked up at him, and I knew his eyes were different,
Mm-hmm.
but his voice, it was just, I'd never heard him speak to me like that before, but there was nothing behind the eyes. It was like a dead fish eye. And
Mm-hmm.
he said, "Tonight's the night I have to kill you." And all of the training that I had done as a child, that actually sprung into action. And I thought to myself, this is it. Like I need to make it out alive. And I actually knocked him out. And I grabbed my son and I ran out the door. Um, Prior to this, about a month prior to that fateful night, I had packed a diaper bag with an extra canister of container, 4 bottles, some baby clothes and diapers,
Mm-hmm.
and just some change of clothes for my son, as well as our ID. I had put that in there. And, I think subconsciously that was my own kind of exit slash safety plan for myself, because I think I kind of knew subconsciously that this day might come. I don't remember really knowing why I packed a bag, but I did. And I put it under the attic stairs by the basement. And I remember about a month prior,
Mm-hmm.
I just thought to myself, you never know, you may need this at one point. And so on that night, after I knocked him out, I knew I didn't have too much time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just opened the door, grabbed my son like a football, and slung that diaper bag over my shoulder, and I ran out. And I only had one friend, and that's the thing. He really controlled who I spoke to and who I could befriend. And it was my son's babysitter, this nice Christian lady. Uh, and I never really got the chance to really thank her. So Maria, in Mississauga, Ontario, if you are listening to this podcast, I want to say thank you. She actually took me in uh, and helped me escape back home to Vancouver.
Wow. Mina, it is such an incredible story. Like, even to now, it is so tough. And like, where did you go then? Because did you have someone in your family or an old friend that you went to? Because I mean, home wasn't exactly a safe place for you back in Vancouver. Where did you go?
I actually did end up coming back home.
Mm-hmm.
Prior to me going back home, because I had tried to book the earliest flight, and the next flight was the next following day in the
Mm-hmm.
evening. And so prior to that, I'd called my mom in Vancouver and basically said, like, I actually have to tell you something. So you need to sit down, mom. And, she really didn't have an idea that this was what I'd been going through.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to tell her that I'd been abused for 4 years, um, and that I was coming home.
Mm-hmm.
My mom was, I think, very relieved
Mm-hmm.
and very happy that I was finally coming home, and she said, she goes, I always knew that you weren't happy, but I didn't know why.
Mm-hmm.
And so she just said, why did you keep that from us? We could have done something. And I remember my father saying to me, well, if you bring that baby home, you're just going to have a tough life. So, why don't you give him to that side of the family and just come by yourself? Because otherwise, you're going to have a hard life raising that child by yourself. And, anyways, he is a descendant of that family. And I said to my father, I said, are you out of your mind? This
Mm-hmm.
is your first and only grandson. And I said, what is so important about the last name and being a descendant of that family? And I remember saying to my father, well, what if we were to change his last name to Kim?
Mm-hmm.
And my dad said, oh yeah, then if he's going to take on our family last name, then you bring him, and so that just shows the mentality, of what my father was thinking,
Mm-hmm.
and and you can imagine that wasn't really a safe place for me, but part of me knew that if I was coming home with a baby, that uh, the abuse wouldn't probably take place. So I took
Mm-hmm.
that chance and I came back home to Vancouver. Um, and I remember having to get custody and working my way through the courts. And let me tell you, Georgia, our, I don't want to speak too ill of our justice system, but here in Canada, it's it's a joke.
Mm-hmm.
Our justice system is not, I would say, is still comparable to the 1970s and the 1980s.
Mm-hmm.
Not much has changed. Having to get full custody. And I got taken to court once a year, probably for about 10 years. And all of it had to do with after I got the full custody and a restraining order.
Mm-hmm.
It was just going back once a year because he didn't want to pay child support.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, mind you, $329 a month is not very much, but he was able to convince a judge that because he had bipolar disorder and due to his mental illness that he couldn't work, and that he wanted the child support amount to be lowered, decreased to $100 a month. I mean, really think about what can $100 a month do. But you know the judge allowed it. Like
What?
329 is not much anyways, and then so it got reduced to $100 a month. And not only that, the judge took off $10,000 in arrears on top of that. So this will tell you about our justice system and how it does not protect the actual victim. And the judge said, well, let's give the man a chance and see if he will pay. Well, what's happened since then? We're back up to 30,000 owing in child support in arrears, and the man has never paid. But which I don't care if I see that money or not, but I'm quite disgusted with our justice system. And this man had breached the restraining order, I would say 12 times.
Wow.
And the latest, the latest that he breached it was in 2018. Um, and it was through Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
He was actually able to find someone to hack into my Facebook, and he took pictures off of my timeline that had my son and myself on my timeline, and he had pasted it onto his timeline and photoshopped himself into every picture. And that's so creepy because
Oh,
it was as if psychologically he wanted to say, I'm still there, I'm
yeah.
a part of this family.
Mm.
And it was so like creepy and weird to see him photoshopped into every single picture that I had put on my timeline. And then phone calls started happening on Facebook Messenger. I mean, those guys really need to up their security. That's what I would like to say about Facebook. But
Mm.
yeah, he was able to call
Mm-hmm.
and leave messages. Just call me at this number. I still love you, what have you. Um, and I was just like, there's a restraining order, buddy. Like stop this. And finally, I actually got to say what I wanted to say, and it was very empowering and really good place for me because I was no longer afraid, and I got to tell him exactly what I thought of him and where I wanted him to go and how to get there. And I was able to tell him, good so and so, you know, this is what I really think of you. You're a really sad, sorry excuse for a human being. And the thing is, he never once took accountability or ever admitted trying to kill me. And the weirdest thing that he said to me was, if you didn't leave in the middle of the night, we could have had 3 or 4 more kids. Like, can you imagine the rationale? How could I have popped out 3 or 4 more kids if I was dead on that night?
Mm.
You know? um, and my son also got to tell him what he thought of him. And I also told him, if you ever come to Vancouver, there's beatdown number 2 waiting for you from not only myself, but our son will kick your ass too. So, you know, I'm not afraid of you anymore. And by the way, the restraining order is still valid. So, you know, I am going to report this. And the thing is, let's talk about our law enforcement. You're going to be absolutely flabbergasted.
Mm-hmm.
So, one would expect that
Mm-hmm.
when you call the Royal Canadian Mounted Police here, that, and I'm sure most police forces say that they're there to serve and protect.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I did not get that. First, I was told that my restraining order was too old, though there was no expiration date. It was pronounced in 2001, but they said your restraining order is too old. And so I thought, well, there's no expiration date, so it's still valid. And
Mm.
the police, one of this, I will say, it was a staff sergeant of some detachment in the lower mainland of British Columbia that said, what did you do to make him so mad to have him still contact you? What did you do so wrong that he's still contacting you? And what are you afraid of, Miss Black Belt? Uh, and he's on the other side of the country. And so, basically reshaming and re-victimizing me.
Mm.
And I was not okay with that. I really wasn't. I mean, I was, I don't want to say that I was afraid so much as really disgusted that these people that are supposed to protect, vulnerable people had the audacity to say, what did you do so wrong that he's still chasing after you all of these years? And what are you afraid of, Miss Black Belt? And he's on the other side of the country. So basically, simmer down is what I gathered what he was saying. And so I had a really good lawyer at the time who basically said, well, we're ready to fly to Ontario, my client and I, and we're ready to take this to court. And no, her restraining order is still active and valid because there's no expiration date.
Mm.
And so basically, from my recollection, my ex just got a slap on the wrist saying, don't do it again. if you do, we'll have to give you some jail time. But this was the 12th breach. So you tell me, you know? Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
This persisting attitude, not just in obviously Canadian law enforcement, but in society, I think, where we're so concerned that the repercussions for doing the wrong thing for the perpetrator, like it's going to ruin their life by putting them in jail, or it's going to ruin their life if they have to pay all of their money to the victim, or it's going to ruin their life if the claims turn out to be false and they were falsely accused. Just in case, we better sit on the
Yeah.
fence a little bit. Just makes it easier for perpetrators to attack victims, and it makes it
Mhm.
so much harder for victims to recover. And we're seeing this happen right
Exactly.
now in sport, in our sport, in Brazilian jiu-jitsu. This is really coming out at the moment, where we're seeing that
Yes.
the emphasis for the last, I guess, 2020, so the last 30 years in jiu-jitsu being such a new sport, but has really come up with this idea of, that just in case the woman is lying, we better make sure we back the man, because heaven forbid he miss a week of pay while we investigate, or get work with get stood down from work but with pay while we investigate, or his name might be tarnished. Even if he's proven innocent, his
Mhm.
name might be tarnished. So we have to make sure that we're looking after that before we look into the seriousness of this, to make sure that we're protecting the victim. Like, it's really
Yeah.
disgusting.
Yeah. And like, what kind of a society do we live in where the perpetrator is protected? I mean, even the staff sergeant said, well, how do we know that the text messages that we're seeing on your messenger from him, how do we know that he sent it? You know, do you have concrete proof? And I said, so I just said, oh, so now I could be making this up. Is that what you're saying? Well, and they basically said, well, how do we know this? And so I just felt like just so much that I wasn't going to get any help, and that it was just useless and futile, right? And this is very commonplace with victims. Once they escape, their story's not believed, or they're having to retell their story, and but then on top of that, they're getting re-victimized and re-shamed by law enforcement that's supposed to be out there to protect them. So it's just, you can see, and I'm not giving validity as to why women go back, but or why they don't leave, but if this is what you're faced with after you leave, then uh, where are we actually, in all of this?
Yeah, it really, really adds to the story. And I think it speaks a lot to things that people will say, like, for example, with the social media world that we live in right now. If somebody comes out and like tells their story publicly, you'll see people commenting, saying things like, well, how do we know this is true? Or like, yeah, but like, have you thought about if this is a lie, how this is going to affect the person? And it might be like a gut reflex that they feel like, well, what if this was me and I was being falsely accused? Like, someone needs to protect the men. But
Mm-hmm.
I think what people don't realize is that every time you react like that with someone else, there's a victim who's silently watching that thing, getting evidence for who they will and won't tell. And it's kind of piecing more of a picture into their mind of, oh, wow, I was going to tell my story, but now that I see how likely it is that I'm not going to be believed,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to. And every time you see that happen to somebody else, it makes you be like, no, like I don't want to tell my story only to be told that I'm a liar on top of everything else. Like, that's the last thing that I want. That's horrific, right? It really does make it so much easier for attackers to control victims and to keep them silent. If the way that
Yes.
we meet victims is with distrust, because
Mm-hmm.
that's what's happening.
Exactly. Exactly. So yeah, it's it's not is still not good enough. What is being done these days with law enforcement and victims, and having to go through the whole court process, like, in my opinion, it hasn't changed since the 1970s. It's still um perpetrator friendly.
Yeah, and the statistics would agree with that. Like there has been by no means any reduction in the amount of assault against women and children in the domestic setting and otherwise, but especially in the domestic setting. Like, and
Right.
you would think that as we've gotten smarter, more advanced with technology, that we would see a reduction in that, but it's actually increasing. Even before
Mhm.
COVID, it was increasing, and now since COVID, it's exponentially seems to be increasing. I don't think we're going to know the effect of all of these quarantines and financial pressures and all the things that have come with the pandemic until maybe years from now we'll start to unpack some of the impact of this. And you know there are conversations that are getting started, and I think
Mhm.
all change starts with a conversation, and that's great. But yeah, we definitely have a long way to go to change to a world that makes it victim friendly instead of perpetrator friendly.
Exactly. And I don't want to bring sex into it, but or gender, but I do think that obviously females are a lot more compassionate, empathetic, and sympathetic to what is happening. And so maybe what it's going to take is to get more female lawyers and police officers and uh, in the justice system that will be the ones to help the victims to feel supported and to actually start going after these abusers and give them their just desserts, if I may say so.
Absolutely. And it's going to be multi-pronged, right?
Mhm.
We need women, of course, but we really need men as champions for this. Men who
Yes.
put themselves in the shoes of the
Feminists.
women instead
Yes.
of in the shoes of the perpetrator. And of course, like there
Mhm.
are situations where women abuse men, there are situations where men abuse men, women abuse women, but like the
Yes.
overwhelming statistically large majority of abuse is men on women, because there is many power dynamic differences from women having babies in the relationships and then for not being able to work, men being able to get work more easily than women, and of course the obvious one is them generally being larger and more powerful, although you were still able to knock your perpetrator out, thank God, right? Otherwise you might not be here today. And that came from, luckily, you having the taekwondo background, and then as you, I guess, started to find your feet and build a life again, you found yourself back into a martial arts gym, in fact a mixed martial arts gym. So tell us about
Yeah.
going back to training.
Well, I mean, I think subconsciously, because the taekwondo I associated with my father, and so I think I understand why I took such a long hiatus from martial arts. But it wasn't because I'd gotten my black belt when I was 18, and
Mm.
then when I was 30, I had met my coach, Simon Posner, at my church. And so when I had left my ex, it was when I was 27. And so during those 3 years, I pretty much had no thoughts of, taking that up again. And I met this coach at the church, and somehow I got thinking about when did I feel strong, and
Mhm.
how am I going to get my power back? And so I started thinking, and I knew that this coach had a mixed martial arts gym, and I started asking questions, and eventually I told my story to him. And I just remember him saying, well, you should come back to martial arts. Uh, and, just come and train and work out with us. And, we'll make sure to take care of you. And that's never going to happen to you again. And I just, it took me a long time, to muster up the courage to go. And so, I mean, from 18 till I was 30, I mean, that was a long time away from martial arts. And I remember walking into the dojo and thinking to myself, oh, this smells really familiar, the
Yes.
gym smell, right?
Uh-huh.
And I remember thinking, though, that, yeah, maybe this will be good for me. And at the time, my son, Martin, forgive me for saying this, when he was about 6, he was a little bit of a whiner and, very, very quick to cry. I'm so sorry, Martin. And
Also, it makes sense that he would be like that, if we think about attachment theory and like everything that he
mhm,
had been through, that he would be more like clingy to his mum. That
mhm,
totally makes sense. He would have the anxious attachment style after trauma.
yes,
So it's nothing on
yes.
him.
And so I thought to myself, well, there's no dad around anyways. Let's make him into a martial artist and give him some self-confidence. And um, it did not only that for him, but also for myself as well. And um, I kind of think of myself at that time being like Humpty Dumpty, and my coach put me back together. And I mean, yes, I did the hard work, but he never stopped. um he never stopped encouraging me, never stopped believing in me. And when I would freak out on the mats, he was right there, right at eye level, when I was getting squashed, where I felt like the air was kind of slowly coming out of my lungs, and I felt like I was just gonna stop breathing. And I remember him just coming down to my level, going, okay, let's not freak out. This could hypothetically happen to you. And so let's calm down. First of all, let's calm down our breathing. Look at me, look in my eyes. You're not gonna die. Right? And breaking everything down. Okay, let's trap the leg. Let's look at different sweeps that we can use. We can look over our shoulder and put our hand in their armpit, and using that trapped leg, you can bring him over, and looking at different sweeps, and really just not freaking out, and learning how to breathe in that moment. Because I think, when you've gone through abuse and you've been held in those positions, it's actually re-triggering, right? And
Mhm.
so I just remember him always, whenever I'd freak out, or if I, let's say, was getting picked apart standing up by like a bigger guy, and he'd be right there. He'd be just that voice in the back of my head, you know what are you gonna do? Get on that bicycle, start moving. You don't want to get hit? Don't stand there. Move your head, use your feet. You have feet, that's your bicycle. Like, let's get moving, and um answer back. If he hits you, hit him back. And I remember eventually at one point he said, you know what, let's talk about competition. And so that ugly part of competition that I hated as a child, um, that kind of was like in the back of my mind,
Mm.
after joining the gym. And when he talked about competition, and because he knew me so well, um, he actually sometimes knew what I was going to say prior to me saying it. And so I remember he said, well, let's talk about competition. And I said, but, and I put my finger up and I said, but, and then he said, I know this probably brings back bad memories from your childhood having to compete. And competition is not about winning and losing. This is a way for you to ground yourself and test yourself for you. And this isn't about you having to beat your opponent. It's having to beat all of your insecurities and all of your I can't do this, this negative self-talk. You can beat this. And I believe that if you were to compete, that you're going to win. And so, I think it took a lot of his encouragement. He probably, at times, like now, because I mean, I've been at that gym now for 14 years. And, part of me now, I kind of chuckle, right? Because I remember um, how different I was and how I lacked self-confidence. And, I was always thinking that I couldn't do stuff. And, oftentimes now I kind of look back and think, he must have thought like, oh my God, this girl, like she just, you know, what's she thinking? Why is she like this? But, and I remember asking him last month, did I ever get annoying because I was such a hard study, and not a quick study either. And was I ever annoying because you know how I was when I first came into the gym, and I just recall him chuckling and kind of giving me the little pat on the head saying, you know what, I never once stopped believing in you, and I never once thought, oh my God, this girl's annoying. He just said, I was so proud of you and I'm still proud of you. And you know like
Yeah.
that's a good coach.
And it really highlights the difference to individuals' approach to hearing
Mm-hmm.
your story, right? One person heard your childhood experience and said it to themselves, this is an opportunity for me to exploit a weakness. And another person heard your story and said, this is a person who has been through a lot and needs my support, and how can I help? Right. And like,
Mm-hmm.
if we talk about what's going to change the world and what's going to change attitudes, it's more people being like Simon, like more people being like your
Mm-hmm.
coach and hearing stories and not questioning it, not doubting you, not putting it
Mm-hmm.
back onto you and saying like, well, maybe you're lying, just taking you as you are at face value and just being there. Like,
Mm-hmm.
wow, what a difference.
Yeah, he became like family, like a big brother. And we speak about the dojo and how once you become a part of the gym, everybody becomes your family, and you become this one big happy family. It's and people may look at it as dysfunctional because we're all beating each other with protective gear on, mind you. But
Mhm.
people can think a martial arts gym is dysfunctional because we beat the crap out of each other, and then when the round ends we hug it out, but that's the thing. I mean, I've gained, like, some of the guys from the gym, I call them bros or brochachos. And they just, and I'm pretty thankful they never once um took it easy on me. They treated me like one of the guys. And basically their thing was, well, on the street, or if a rapist is coming after you, they're going to hit you as hard as we do. You better be ready. And in turn, I mean, that helped when I was competing as well, because if you're used to getting hit and trading back and forth with guys and being taken down by guys, and you know being punched and kicked and elbowed and kneed by guys, it's like when a girl does that to you, it's just like, oh, what was that? Was that a little swat? Like, oh, what was that? Was that a love tap? Oh, of a kick. So yeah, I'm really thankful that somebody actually believed me. And oh, I forgot to tell you, at one point, my ex husband did contact my coach, demanding in caps, little letters, that he wanted to speak to me and my son, and kind of chuckled about it and said, he's yelling at me. And so he just said, well, I did respond back and I said, I'm aware that there's a restraining order. And, you know, so no, you may not talk to Minna and you may not talk to Martin. It's not okay. And so, why don't you pay child support? Maybe that might give you a chance to even have a hello come back to you. But, I do know there's a restraining order. So why don't you buzz off? And he never messaged back, some male that believes in me and believes me and in my story. And, I mean, and that's the thing with this whole Me Too thing in the martial arts world. So many victims are not believed.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's just sad. And so I think, fortunately, I mean, now there's women's only classes. There are women in the gyms now where you can band together, and your story is valid. And there are some really good male martial arts instructors that are,
Mm-hmm.
just like my coach Simon. There's lots out there. But you know but sadly enough, we do hear these stories that are coming out where the victim is not believed.
Yeah, and I think from, like what we're saying, to any men that listen to this podcast, like it really can take one champion, like one champion to stand up and say, like, hang on, no, like we should believe this girl, like we should listen to her. Particularly if you're running a gym, you have that power. But even if you're like a high belt or a high ranking person or a person who's been around the gym for a long time, you can step up and take that role and speak to the coach or speak to the owners and say, if we want to continue thriving as a business, because gyms as businesses that last are not gyms that purely produce fighters. Those are the 1% of gyms that operate as like a UFC institute type gym producing fighters. The majority of gyms have people from the community who want to learn a sport for fun and confidence and all the other reasons why people do martial arts. And 50% of the population are women. If women won't come back to the gym if they're being assaulted, like it's a huge business problem if you're not looking into this, even if you don't look at it from a being a decent human being point of view, if you just look at it from a business point of view. And like I say, it only takes one person to be that champion, to step up and say, like, we need to take this seriously, we need to listen, because other people will then start to listen to you too. So I think that that's something really powerful and actionable that maybe men can do to do something differently. And from you, I'm wondering, Minna, to all the women that are listening to the show, would you have a message for them?
If you are going through domestic violence and you're questioning whether or not you should leave or if you should stay, I mean, it's you that's going to have to make the decision. But if you need help, just reach out. um, I really encourage you to just do what's best for you, and do what's best for your children. I mean, the worst thing that you want is to have your children think that abuse is normal, or that it's okay to treat people the way that you're being treated. And how horrific would it be if your daughter was to find a man exactly like her father, and or if the sons thought that it's okay to treat women that way, and carry on the cycle of abuse. So, my encouraging factor is just, no judgment here, but if you need help, just reach out. There is help available, and, do what's right for you when you're ready.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today, Minna. Like I said, I think you're incredibly brave to have shared your story. And I really hope that, listening to it will benefit someone in some way, whether it's a lesson or inspiration. Like I said, thank you. Thank you very, very much for coming on.
Oh, you're very welcome, Georgia. And also, if there's any master's degree programs that would want to kind of explore fighting back against domestic violence using a trauma-informed and martial arts approach, hit me up. I'd be happy to do that.
Definitely. Please, anyone, we need more research in this field. So please talk to Minna. She is willing to do the hard work. And you get your name on a paper and be a part of pioneering what I really do think is going to be a part of the future of trauma-informed practice and trauma recovery. Have you thought of something to be grateful for today? What was it? I'm grateful for the amazing women that train with me at the Fight Back Project. I'm grateful for Nari and the beautiful song Shape Me heard at the beginning and end of every episode. And I'm grateful for you for listening to this show and helping martial arts keep saving lives. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. If you'd like to leave me a review to help more people find the show, that's a bonus.
Nobody shapes me but me. Don't gotta tell you what my name is, I don't gotta explain it. Walk in the room, hear a boom erupting like I'm famous. I'm here shedding shells, I'm shameless. Half in nothing, no complacence. Walk too many tight ropes with no hope, so I became this poster they hold over all the heads of trauma holders. You don't need to know my history, I move boulders. Atlas shrug, cause I lifted the weight up off his shoulders. No pretense of defense, move first like chess soldiers. This goes deeper than empowerment, cause I'm the one that power it. Physical meets mental, challenge me to keep devouring. If I can't change the scenery, at least I change perspectives. No longer isolated, but elevated and selective. Darkest places become beautiful spaces. This is where rage meets patience, meets power meets gracious. Meets, we're so glad you came and the feeling is contagious. When you the walking impact of intended bad intentions. When you the manifesting of collecting all they tensions. You the soul and body hold it all and still remember. But I'm a work in progress, testament to all contenders. Forgot what it was like to have control over self. Forgot what it was like to be the one in charge. Forgot in my reflection I could see all my wealth. Forgot that with my bare hands I break all these bars, barriers and obstacles. They can't cage me, they can't chronicle all my experiences and reduce them to appearances. When I was truly beaten, gave myself clearances to fall down, mess up, and get myself back up. I'm not looking for clovers cause I don't believe in luck. Damn, you a badass, I heard them say it clearly. Why thank you very much, I know now I'm not weary of what's next for me. Cause I expect to see growth like I was planted, watered, fed, and bloomed to be. The positivity and accountability, knowing they won't step if I'm the agent of my agency. I think I found my voice again, huh? I think I found my voice again, huh? I'm not sorry, you're the end where I begin. Boundaries, I know them well. Take a breath and meditate. Who is she? I know her well. Now I get to open gates. 1, 2, 1, 2. I don't need your permission. And if you get uncomfortable, then use your intuition to know that I won't stay where respect is ever missing. And everything I do, that's me making decisions. It's truly underrated, the value of self-worth. Forgot that I was rich from the moment of my birth. A penny from my thoughts, no really, you can't afford it. You cannot buy my story, rewrite it, or record it. You cannot buy my story, rewrite it, or record it, huh?